Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I am your co-host, Billy Muzio. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Jody Smith. We are off to the races here. It is Week 9, Jody. A lot of teams on buys this week. We have some ugly Thursday Night Football probably ahead of us as well. It's just a Philly and Texan kind of week, huh? We got the World Series. We got the Thursday Night Football, Philly versus the Texans as well. And we are going to be covering tonight a lot of the trade news. So we're going to go over the trades, the fantasy impact, and what it means for your fantasy teams, what we think of those players moving forward here in 2022. And then we're going to be covering the elephant in the room with Bateman going to season-ending IR, as well as Michael Thomas going to season-ending IR. So stick around right after the intro. We'll get started here to talk about the trade impact to your fantasy teams. Hold tight.
Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
It's go time. I just tweeted on to everybody that we are live. Again, for those who are just joining us, we're going to be talking about the trade deadline, what it means for your fantasy teams. We're going to be talking about the news with Rashod Bateman today going to season-ending IR, Michael Thomas going to season-ending IR, and then, of course, we are here for Thursday Night Football and to answer all of your start-sit questions. We're just pretty much going to avoid Thursday Night Football. It's going to be an ugly game. Jody, let's just dive right into it. Let's talk TJ Hawkinson. So this kind of got the trade deadline kind of fire started, right? The smoke started with TJ Hawkinson. The Vikings got TJ Hawkinson, and they got a fourth round pick in 2023, fourth round pick in 2024. The Lions got a 2023 second and a 2024 third. Who do you think won the trade? What does this mean for TJ Hawkinson moving forward?
Well, from a fantasy perspective, if anything, it's my initial write up when we covered that yesterday was that I said it was probably a lateral move from his fantasy perspective. It might even be a slight bit of a downgrade. Now he gets better, from a quarterback perspective, but the Vikings haven't been this. They're 11th in passing yards. They haven't been quite this elite offense that we kind of thought they were going to be with this new aggressive approach they were going to take this year. They've been okay, but Kirk Cousins is probably a couple spots lower than we kind of expected, and now with Hawkinson there, definitely an upgrade for the Vikings that they just lost Irv Smith for. I think he's probably done for pretty much the rest of the year, but they don't throw a ton of targets to their tight ends, and Hawkinson, he might be third in the pecking order when it comes to targets outside of after Jefferson and what's this? Their number
Thielen?
2. Yeah, Adam Thielen. I was saying Trotman. I had to Adam. Right? That doesn't sound right. But KJ Osborne's a legitimate, number 3 receiver. So there's going to be weeks I think that you'll see Osborne out target Hawkinson. But like I said, overall, looking at my rest of season rankings, I don't believe I moved Hawkinson up or down at all. I think I just left him where he was because, like I said, it's
tight end 4 on the year. He's averaging 12.2 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Season so far, 26 of 43 balls that he's caught, 395 yards and 3 touchdowns. So keeping him around tight end 4 moving forward.
I have him a little bit lower than that, but like I said, wherever he is, I think with me rest of season, he's 6. So, I didn't.
The fact that he looks like the Viking.
The Lions are 7th in passing. The Vikings are 11th in passing. So it's not a huge change or difference at all. Detroit's been kind of hemorrhaging here over the last, since their bye week. They haven't really started throwing the ball again, and they're battling injuries as it is.
So the fact that he looks like the Vikings mascot does not give him a bump in your rankings?
It depends on how good he sounds when with the horn. I have to do a little analytics on that.
Look, I think it's about right. We're probably going to see him on a week-to-week basis, depending upon matchups, somewhere between that 4 and 7 range. Rest of the season probably lands the same. I think this was a good get for the Vikings. Irv Smith just has not been able to stay healthy and hasn't been the talent that we thought he was going to be for this offense. And the Lions, clearly are still in rebuild mode. They seem to have found their wide receiver one. If Swift can ever stay healthy, they have their running back. This is going to give them, a lot more arsenal for the 2023 draft as well. Moving on, Nyheim Hines on the year right now, running back 49. Year to date, averaging 7.6 fantasy points per game. He was traded to the Colts for a conditional 6th-round pick in 2023, as well as Zach Moss. Do you think Zach Moss was like, here, you have to take him? Or do you think that the Colts actually wanted Zach Moss in this deal?
Well, it feels like maybe they knew Jonathan Taylor's more injured than they kind of let on. I mean, here he hasn't practiced yet. He hurt his ankle again in this last game, and he hasn't practiced yet this week. So that's probably a concern, but Zach Moss has been a fantasy enigma more than anything over his career. He's never really been able to put too much together. He's just probably going to be depth. I'm more, curious of why Buffalo was so interested in Hines when they had Devin Singletary's fine, as a receiver. There's no issues there. You just invested a 2nd-round pick in James Cook, who was – initially, we all thought was going to come in and be that change of pace 3rd down guy. So, you spend a 2nd-rounder on him. Now you just, you bring in Hines. So I don't know if that's indicative that they've lost some sort of confidence in Cook, or if it's just them, they just see it as a depth chart. It makes me wonder, do they actually view Nyheim Hines as a guy that's going to come in and, work right into a committee? They're not shy to go, with the committee backfield. You've seen them do it even before. But like I said, I think overall Devin Singletary's been fine. I don't have any huge concerns, with him. He's RB 28 on the season. He's 31 targets, 23 receptions. He's been good in that role.
Yeah, right when we thought we were going to start seeing more Cook, it seemed to be that he had kind of earned more of a role these last couple of weeks. The Hines trade kind of threw it for a loop. However, Buffalo has been in the mix for a running back, I should say, at least inside of the trade rumors for quite some time. And we all know that it's one of their only weaknesses on this team, quite frankly. Singletary has filled in pretty admirably, as you have stated, and in the passing game as well. We talked about it inside of the Trade Impact article over at Full Time Fantasy, and you look at what Singletary has done on the year, and most of his work has been through the air. 151 routes, 5th most of the running back position, 55.7% route participation, which is the 8th most, and he's seen a 12.4 target percent share, which is the 14th most amongst running backs. So I think that Hines immediately kind of kills that aspect of Singletary moving forward. I think we're going to see maybe a mixture of maybe Cook gets mixed in on 1-2 downs with Singletary. I don't think a lot. I think it's going to be Singletary and Hines show for the most part moving forward. But a conditional 6th-round pick, pretty cheap get for Buffalo, and adds some much-needed insurance and gets them another pass-catching back out of the backfield for Josh Allen. So I like the trade for them. I think that was a nice get for them, although one has to wonder, why not just give up a 4th and go after Kareem Hunt? That was the asking price that we heard for Kareem Hunt. So, were you surprised to see him not moved prior to the trade deadline ending?
No, right before the season started, I think he was trying to get himself traded, and they kind of set the table that they were going to play hardball with him. So it wasn't really a surprise. I don't think that he wasn't moved, but is his contract up after this year? They can just let him walk, and then if his contract's up and they let him walk and he signs somewhere else, they're looking at maybe a compensatory draft pick for losing him. So maybe they viewed like, we'd rather just keep him as insurance and take that than just moving for a 4th. But also for them to want a 4th meant that maybe a team like the Bills who think, we just need someone to come in and spell Devin Singletary. So we don't really need to make a mid-round investment in a Kareem Hunt. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes what we do is we view things just from the fantasy lens, and it's a lot different than being an NFL GM, and just like how none of us saw what the Patriots did in the first round of the draft this year. Sometimes we all think we got it all figured out, we're all smart, and then it just takes one person viewing it from a realistic standpoint to completely blow things up.
Yeah, last year on his contract, he's a UFA next year. He's a $6 million cap hit, 1.5 dead. So they could have moved him, but I like your strategy there. Next up is Chase Edmonds and Bradley Chubb, but for fantasy purposes, Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds on the year, running back 48, averaging 6.2 fantasy points per game. We've seen his usage kind of just taper off over the last 3 weeks, especially when he was on Miami. He's now traded to the Broncos. The Broncos got Chase Edmonds. The Broncos also got a first in 2023 and a fourth-round pick in 2024. Miami gets Bradley Chubb. They also were part of a Jeff Wilson trade that we will talk about here shortly, but on the year, Chase Edmonds, 42 attempts on the ground, 120 yards with 2 touchdowns. Add another 10 catches on 17 targets for 96 yards and another score. How does this backfield shake up? We have Melvin Gordon there already. Latavius Murray's there. Boone went to IR. Chase Edmonds comes in now. Does he immediately get inserted as the pass-catching back in this Broncos offense? And if so, what does it mean for fantasy purposes? If not, how are you kind of breaking down this backfield, projecting it to be moving forward?
Well, it sounds like it's going to be, an awful, frustrating mix. So it already was bad in the sense of we were trying to project Latavius Murray or Melvin Gordon every week. Now it's just going to be with Chase Edmondson. But to answer your first question, yeah, he probably will inherit that pass catching role. It's not an area that Melvin Gordon's, I think, at best okay in that role. He's not someone that stands out, and Latavius Murray, it's not something that they've been really asking him to do. But overall, Denver's offense has just been so bad, and it starts at the top with Russell Wilson's play. So maybe they're thinking, we got to get some better weapons here. We got to change our philosophy overall. But speaking of disappointment, and Chase Edmonds, Billy, that's a guy that you and I hyped, this summer. We thought he was going to be really good in that role. And, in week 1, he had, I think, 12 carries and 4 catches. So 16 touches in week 1. We said, all right, but that was going to be it. He peaked at that point. He has not gotten double-digit touches again the rest of the whole season. There was one game, I believe he caught a couple of touchdown passes, or maybe he ran a couple in, I think, in 1 week. But other than that, he's been, a complete dud, and there's nowhere to go but up. I don't feel like, in Miami, he was just, I guess he was in a doghouse, and clearly Miami had, we'll get to that in a second. They had every intent to use, a different back. It just wasn't going to be Edmonds. So it's probably overall a nice little upgrade for Chase Edmonds. But, when you look at bigger backs like Murray and Gordon, it probably it's hard to envision him getting anything more than change of pace carries. He's, even though he punched in a couple of short yardage that one game in Miami, it's hard to view him as the kind of guy that's going to be able to take those kind of touches away from Gordon and Murray. So it just feels like it's going to be a pretty frustrating mess. It takes away some of the value and upside from Gordon and Murray, and it just feels like every week it's going to be a question. These guys are going to be all, when we're doing our rankings, we're going to all be around, running back 30 to 40. So you're going to have 3 guys from one team in there, and it's just going to be something that, if you can avoid it. There's still, I guess, some potential that they really like what they saw on film with Edmonds, and they feel like, they I know this is impossible to think, but that maybe something that Denver staff feels like they can unlock. Because
I hope so.
I don't even mean that as a joke, because that franchise, that offense has been kind of clueless this year. But that's about all. That's about all we can hope for.
Yeah, Chase Edmonds in the doghouse for his drops, 23.5% drop rate, second most at the running back position in the NFL through the first 8 weeks. That's why we saw his snap count kind of taper off from 39% to the 20% as Mostert kind of took over that backfield and they just essentially phased him out. I still have hope, though, for Chase Edmonds as a talent. I still think he has the ability to be a top 30 back in this NFL. He definitely has shown it when he was in Arizona. Definitely a miss in my preseason rankings. I thought he was going to be a lot more involved. I think it's one of the larger misses that I've had for the season so far.
We were on the same page there, and we're not alone in that.
Honestly, the most exciting thing about Chase Edmonds all year has been this video.
This is Chase Edmonds, running back for the Miami Dolphins, and you are listening to Grind Time, powered by Full Time Fantasy. Go Fins.
And that's it. That's all we saw of Chase Edmonds all year. So let's move on. Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson replaces Chase Edmonds in Miami, and the Niners got a 2023 fifth-round draft pick for him. On the season so far has filled in admirably for Elijah Mitchell, but we knew something had to give once the Niners signed Christian McCaffrey. And Jeff Wilson on the year right now, running back 30 year to date, averaging 9.2 fantasy points per game. He is actually in the top 15, so 15th most rushing yards in the league. He's had 468 rushing yards so far in the season, 2 scores. He's had another 10 catches for 91 yards. Wilson gets to reunite with McDaniels and Mostert, his former OC when he was on the Niners, now head coach, of course, in Miami, and his running back mate, Mostert. They've had a lot of familiarity with each other. Are you projecting this backfield to look very similar to maybe the Niners when they had the two of them and made a push down the stretch, or how are you expecting this backfield to play out in Miami now?
Probably exactly what they envision. You just mentioned their ties back to the Bay Area, and that's probably exactly what they think is going to happen. Miami needed to do a little something better because, Raheem Mostert is one of the most, I don't want to say brittle, but he's one of the most injury-prone running backs, in football. So, and if he is the guy that they're now clearly is going to be their main guy, it made more sense for them to get a backup that they felt more comfortable with, that could fill in. It'll probably be more of a 60-40 type situation. Jeff Wilson has been good. You mentioned how he's been able to come out of nowhere, and you said he was 15th in rushing, which is actually pretty impressive. Miami's 28th overall on the ground, and this is an offense that, it's starting to pick up steam again from the passing game. You've got 2 top 10 wideouts, so they need to restore a little bit of balance, I think. And clearly the Dolphins, in the other trades that they've made, this is a team that's, going for it. And I applaud that. It really feels like, this is a potential situation where kind of like the Broncos, it's going to be a little frustrating, but with the Dolphins, anyone who has Raheem Mostert, you're going to keep starting him. But now Jeff Wilson, if he is around that 40% timeshare mark, and he's going to get a couple of targets here and there too. I don't feel like usage wise, the Dolphins will, I don't think they envision one or the other as a change of pace receiving down guy. They'll probably give whole drives to each back. They'll probably give maybe Raheem Mostert starts off the first couple of drives, and then Jeff Wilson gets one. And hey, if that means he gets 6-7 carries and a target on that drive, well, then so be it. But I don't really think that they'll rotate him. I mean, overall, it's probably an upgrade overall for Jeff Wilson because with Christian McCaffrey now in San Francisco, his playing time was going to get limited. And Elijah Mitchell, he's probably due to be back here in the next handful of weeks, so that would have just further eaten into his potential usage. So overall, I think it's a fine move for the Dolphins and for fantasy perspective too.
All right, everybody, I see all the questions in the chat. We're going to work our way through these last 2 trade candidates, or I should say last 2 trades, and then we'll answer some of those start-sit questions before we move into the Rashod Bateman news, and then we'll carry on to Michael Thomas news. So moving along, Chase Claypool traded from the Steelers to the Bears. For the Bears' second-round pick, we're estimating it to be probably around pick 45-ish, which is pretty good return on a receiver who they also selected in the second round. Wide receiver 38 year-to-date, 9.8 fantasy points on average, 32 receptions on 50 targets, 311 yards, 1 touchdown. He also has 8 rushing attempts of 55 yards, 64th in the league in receiving yards as of right now. What does this do for Chase Claypool's value moving forward? Do you like the move for his career? Do you like it for the Bears? I know I like it for Pickens, but what does it mean for the Bears and for Claypool?
Well, for Claypool, he went from the offense that was 24th in passing. Now it's dead last. So it's hard to really think this is a good move for him. I don't feel like – I know he's going to be the undisputed number 2 receiver in Chicago, where in Pittsburgh it was kind of him. That's the role he was supposed to have. But really he was, 1 week it could have been Pickens, and then it could have been him as the number 2 guy. It's hard to really get too excited about this move. I think it makes sense for the Bears. They got a pretty young receiver that they feel like can develop. This is the new regime and new staff in Chicago. They didn't inherit their quarterback. They didn't inherit much, but this is something that they, clearly they like something to him. So, maybe he's the first building block that they, want to revamp and relook at their offense. But, it's not anything I figure, for this season, it's a move in the wrong direction for Claypool's value. I mean, maybe dynasty wise, it's at best lateral. If the Bears can figure out, they've been a little better, offensively here in the last 3 weeks or so. I mean, Fields is he's
trending in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a promise there, but it's nothing that's on my radar. Every week when we were doing rankings and stuff, you'd have Claypool in the wide receiver 40 to 50 range, and now the volume's going to go down a little bit, and his target share will go down a little bit. I mean, the playing time may go up, but in this offense. Yeah.
So my question is, where do you think we see him line up? So he has been running the 3rd most routes out of the slot in the NFL, 305 slot snaps this year, 69.8% rate. He has also seen the 10th most routes run at the wide receiver position, 268. So do you think they keep him in the slot inside Chicago, or do you think they move Darnell Mooney back to the slot, who operated there in 2021?
I think that they'd be more. I think they'd be more effective if they were able to get a perimeter threat that could get downfield a little bit, like Claypool, or someone that had some size that could, act as a potential red zone threat and open things up underneath for Mooney. I think ideally that's probably what they envision, but we're just gonna have to see. I would put. I think Claypool's been more effective as a perimeter guy. I mean, don't you feel like what we saw from Mooney last year has been extremely lacking, at least in the first half of this year, and that's because the coverage and that's just the offense in general. I mean, you got to start changing stuff, so that could be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Mooney right now is running out of the slot 32.6% rate, number 21 in the league. I would assume that they would keep him there. That's where he's been more effective. And to have someone on the perimeter as a true X, Claypool does have the body, the speed to do so. So I agree there. I think that's probably how they do it. We shall see what the Bears decide to do, though, moving forward. One of the most interesting trades, nothing for fantasy here in 2022, but definitely impacts 2023. Calvin Ridley goes to the Jags, and they got very creative on how they did this. So the Jags got a 2023 sixth, they got a fifth, and 2023 fifth, a 2024 conditional fourth. However, if Ridley reaches certain incentives, it becomes a 2023 third, and if he is signed to a long-term contract, it can become a second. So very creative. Does this move the needle for you in Dynasty on Calvin Ridley?
Well, on initial surface, it feels like it was going to be a downgrade, but we're forgetting how little volume has come out of Atlanta right now, and we don't know like where the Falcons are from a dynasty perspective right now. Because is Ritter going to be their potential quarterback, or have they felt like most of us that Marcus Mariota has been quite a bit of a surprise, and do they feel like he can be a little bit more than this bridge option? Do they feel like, hey, maybe we can go forward? I'm guessing that the Falcons will still be looking for that quarterback of the future. So if that's where they are, complete at the beginning of a rebuild, then you can't really like what Ridley's potential and dynasty value could have been. And even if he were there this year, we can see with just how frustrating that offense has been for the rookie. The volume wouldn't have been there to support two receivers, so it feels like a upgrade. It's a sneaky little value pit for the Jaguars in the sense of, they can if they want. If they feel like things aren't working out, then they don't necessarily have to re-sign Ridley, and they could just move away from a potential nice wide receiver too for pretty cheap value, and then. Much better at quarterback in Jacksonville. There's a better offensive supporting cast in place, and you got a pretty good coach there that knows how to get the most out of his number one receiver. So it feels like a little bit of an upgrade for me from a dynasty perspective.
Okay. Yep. I agree with everything you said there. Let's go ahead and get into some questions. So we have a lot of them inside the chat. The first one from Naughty is about Bateman. We will get to that because the next segment we'll be talking about Rashod Bateman and the wide receivers that remain now inside Baltimore. Remain was a very calculated word because I think that describes what's there. Then we have next question is a deep 14-man PPR, pick 2, Prosh, Josh Reynolds, or Hines. I'm going to say Reynolds and Hines here as long as
you can't play Prosh. I mean, he's barely seen the field, and you're talking about an offense that Devin, they run a lot of just one wide receiver sets there in Baltimore, and Prosh isn't going to be the guy that they're going to utilize too much in that role. So no, you can't start him.
Okay, next question we have is from Salvatore. We have going forward, he's got I'm assuming that's Herbert or Tua. He's thinking of bidding on Tua tonight and starting Tua and dropping. I wouldn't drop Herbert if that's what he's saying. If that is Herbert, I'm not dropping Herbert.
No, you don't. You don't drop. You don't try to get cute and drop top 5, top 6 quarterbacks because someone's going to scoop him up, and then he's going to get hot and go down the playoff stretch and beat you in the postseason. So yeah, you don't do stuff like that.
Next question
when you get a quarterback that's a surefire every week, top 5, top 6 guy, you roll with them. Don't get cute and try to bench them and do stuff like sneak them by waivers for Tua. Even if the matchup for the Dolphins was fantastic, you just don't do it.
So next question we have up is from Giselle, and it's a start-sit question here, and we have Rondale Moore or Allen Robinson. Jody?
Well, Rondale Moore's been, trending. That's our guy. He's been trending in the right direction there. You got to like the over/under on that. The Seahawks Cardinals game is getting to be what is it 50, 49.5, 50 points right there. So you got to like that. And yeah,
Rondale Moore also played the third most snaps last week in the league at the wide receiver position. So DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Evans tied for 1, so 100%. And then Rondale Moore, 98.7%.
Yeah, if anything, having Hopkins back has actually helped more because I guess, when you got Hopkins running those intermediate and deeper routes and commanding more coverage. So it's kind of opened things up for lesser defensive attention for Rondale Moore. And, he's a guy that, me, I've always been team Rondale Moore. You can just go through my Twitter feed and you can see that. But it's nice to see him coming through and putting up viable fantasy numbers for us.
Okay, next question is Deshaun Jackson. What year are we in, Jody? Deshaun Jackson is back in Baltimore now, back to the field, I should say, and he's playing in Baltimore. We think he's going to play Monday. I think he's going to be activated. What about you?
he could be, but I can't envision it. Did someone ask about him?
Yep.
Okay.
PPR.
Unless you have a way to pivot to another Ravens receiver, which if you're owning two Ravens wideouts,
you're in trouble.
It's risky in itself. But unless you can pivot to him, I don't see how you can even consider it. The guy hasn't played a snap yet, so there's no way you can get cute and think that you can put him in your lineup. Especially, I'd have to see him on the field for more than 5 or 6 snaps.
And you're extremely desperate if you're trying to throw him in your lineup, I think, at this point.
It's a bad week. We got 6 teams on bye this week. I get it, but the guy has 0 points. He hasn't ran a snap. He haven't played. How can you put him in your lineup?
Yeah, I guarantee there's plenty of other options on your waiver wire.
There's 3 terrible wideouts on the Texans that are guaranteed to run 30, 40 routes or plus tonight that you're better off starting than you would be Deshaun Jackson, because we don't even know if he's going to be active.
100% agree, Jody. Next up is Josh Reynolds or Terrace Marshall.
Reynolds is a little dinged up, so I feel like if he's playing, it feels like the right play. I know his Detroit's offense has really sputtered. We mentioned that at the top of the show, and it didn't get really necessarily better at the after their bye week. So, but again, that's a 49.5 over under. Detroit generally plays better at home. Reynolds has, if he's active and healthy, he's got a pretty good path to 6 to 8 targets. So, I mean, feels like a safer play there.
Yeah, last week saw 6 targets, only caught 2 balls though, only 14 yards. The week before, only 2 targets. So Jody hit the hammer on the nail. He is playing banged up. We've seen Khalif Raymond playing ahead of him as well. Jody's sleeper play in week 7 when he hit big. And so I'm going to lean Terrace Marshall here. Terrace Marshall has been playing a lot of snaps in this offense. It's just him and DJ Moore now. We know Christian McCaffrey's gone. We know Robbie Anderson got traded. So I'm going to lean Terrace Marshall in this instance simply because Josh Reynolds has been a little banged up and just has not been himself. Next question is, do you trust Waller this week? Other option is Hayden Hurst.
Oh, I wouldn't have any problems with Hayden Hurst. I mean, Waller, it's the kind of situation where you feel like if he rushes to get back out there and then tweaks it again, then he's off the field and you're taking zeros. I think Hayden Hurst is fine. He's healthy. He's a guy that at best right now, if you were going to do a rankings for Waller, where would you put him, Billy? Like right around 15th, whatever, as a very cautious play. If he was healthy or we knew he was starting, yeah, he's better than Hurst. But right now at this early in the week, it feels like Hurst is the safer play.
And Slayer clarified he meant Deion Jackson, not the Ravens receiver Jackson. So Deion Jackson, big difference.
Yeah. Well, clearly, Jonathan Taylor. I'm starting to feel like
I don't think he's playing.
No, I think the Colts would be better off to just let him get let him get 100%, because we saw what happened. He came back, he re-injured himself, and now they're in this situation where he could potentially be looking to miss another game or two. Where if they had to let him get 100%. This probably could have been avoided. So for sure, if Taylor's ruled out, and I would say, like right now, I'm thinking that's 60% likely, or maybe even higher. He hasn't practiced yet. Tomorrow will be the big day, because if you don't practice Friday, it typically means you're not playing. Or if you're limited Friday, that means you're really, questionable, leaning towards being out. Got to like Deion Jackson, what he did earlier this year when he got that chance to come in there. He was a money. He had I think he had 120 rushing yards, something like that. Caught several passes. Been great. Can't necessarily expect that kind of volume, but the Patriots have kind of struggled against the run. So I would, if Taylor's ruled out, I would feel pretty comfortable with Deion Jackson being probably around 20 or even higher for the week.
Yeah, so in his 2 starts, I should say, or 2 full games, he had against Denver, 13 attempts, 62 yards. He was running back 25 for the week, 4 targets for 29 yards. And then we saw him in week 6 against Jacksonville, 12 attempts, 42 rushing yards, score on the ground, and then he came back with 10 receptions on 10 targets, 79 receiving yards, 23.1 fantasy points, and finished the week as the number 1 running back in the league. I'm going to say if Taylor is out, and I do think he's going to be out, Deion Jackson is probably a top 25 back this week, even against New England. So he's going to be that kind of mid to high end RB2, in my opinion, that like running back 18 through 22 range, just kind of off the top of my head without crunching the numbers. That's kind of where I put him at. I think the Colts would be wise to rest him. And I do think that I'd be starting him in most of my lineups if I have him on my team. Next question we have is, which 2 of the following wide receivers are best moving forward? Palmer, Garrett Wilson, London, Carter, Duvernay, or Wan'Dale Robinson. So pick 2 of those moving forward.
You got to like Palmer's role now. I mean, at least in the next, say, month, because it looks like Keenan Allen, I don't know if he's even going to be back this year. He's hurt again. So you kind of have to like the likelihood that well, he's already had a pretty secure role as a number 3 receiver there. But in the next, assuming Allen is out this week, but Mike Williams is guaranteed to miss at least 2 or 3 more games, you have to like Palmer's, short-term value. And then at worst, if Allen and Mike Williams are healthy, you're still talking about the number 3 wideout on a top 5 passing offense. You're going to have to remind me who the other players were.
Garrett Wilson, Drake London, DeAndre Carter, same offense from Palmer, and then Duvernay and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson is interesting to me. I like the way that they've used him, but he didn't do much for us last week. And Drake London is obviously the best player in that group here, but sheer volume, he's just not getting it there. You're talking about an offense that if they could, they'd just run the ball 35, 40 times a game and just throw when necessary. He's, as a undisputed number 1 receiver, he's towards the bottom of that right now, simply because the total lack of volume. And Kyle Pitts has finally shown a little bit of signs of life here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that's, if anything, that hurts London just a little bit more.
Yeah, if they could guarantee me like the usage that we saw from Drake London in the first 3 weeks, I think this would pretty easily be London and Palmer for me moving forward. I probably lean Garrett Wilson as of right now.
Well, that was the other guy I was going to mention, but again, you have a quarterback that's really hurting him.
Yeah, and it is the quarterback, but you look at what's happening right now. Corey Davis is out injured. They lost Breece Hall, who was getting a lot of targets. They also apparently are just rocky relationship right now with Elijah Moore. So Wilson is going to be featured in this offense, in my opinion. So as of right now, I lean Palmer and Wilson. If you want to go London in this scenario, I'm not going to knock it just because I think he's the best talent. Or I should say him and Wilson are probably the 2 most talented of this group. But just based upon what Jody said and the amount that they're running, it makes you a little bit more concerned about the role moving forward. And we have seen Kyle Pitts getting more involved as well. So slight lean Wilson for me and Palmer. And Jody picked Wan'Dale and Palmer. So at least you got one of us, or one name out of the 2 of us that are the same. Next question, and then we're going to rock and roll through Rashod Bateman before we wrap up the podcast. Full PPR, London or Connor if he plays?
I mean, it's getting to the point where you can't really even trust James Conner. He's been one of the biggest disappointments. But and it's safe to say, I think that even if James Conner is active this week and plays, don't you feel like Benjamin has really carved out? He should have carved himself out a more consistent role. So it feels like maybe the Cardinals are going to go more towards committee type situation. But we just talked about Drake London's overall lack of upside because of the status of that passing game. But that said, in PPR, I'm going to lean towards a number 1 receiver more often than I'm going to target a lesser RB2. And the thing is, I'm a fan of James Conner overall. I was on board with him last year as my comeback player, and that ended up working out great. And this year, the exact opposite has happened. So yeah, it feels like, like I said, in PPR, I'd rather lean towards, a potential number one wideout in those five, in this case, 5 to 8 target than James Conner, who, like I mentioned, might, even if he's healthy, he might, be in a 50-50 rotation with, Benjamin now.
Yeah, I agree here. I've stated it time and time again. My draft partner Dave has hammered this in my head and said, never start a part-time running back over a full-time wide receiver. And Drake London, although we just talked about the offense and the lack of opportunities, he still ran 88.1% of snaps last week. So he's definitely on the field where Benjamin has definitely proved that he's able to handle the load, especially in the passing game. So if Connor is even active, expect a limited role. Probably more, I'm going to say 55 to 60% and probably more 45% of Connor, just as he, continues to heal, and they can continue to lean on Benjamin in the meantime. So if these are your options, I'm starting London over Connor if he plays. Let's move on to the Rashod Bateman news. So Rashod Bateman news today will have foot surgery and is slated to miss the rest of the season. Remaining receivers on the team: Devin Duvernay, James Proche, Demarcus Robinson, Tylan Wallace, and Deshaun Jackson. Do any of these guys pique your interest? Are you kind of staying away from everybody as a whole, Jody? I think Duvernay probably has the most upside here that we've seen, at least the role that he's been involved in the offense. What's your take on the rest of these receivers?
Yeah, you got to like Duvernay. He's already got 5 total touchdowns on the season, and they found creative ways. He's ran a kickback. He's rushed them in, and he's caught 2 or 3. So I feel like, you look at last week's snap count, they ran it pretty balanced between Proche, Demarcus Robinson, and Devin Duvernay, and Duvernay ran 2 more snaps than those other 2 players. But he like I said, he's getting carries, and they'll use him, I believe, as their number one moving forward. But he'll be one of the lesser number one receivers in football if that's the case. Bigger concern, like I said, is that Lamar Jackson started off really, really hot, but and that was when Bateman was kind of rolling at the very beginning of the season. And you have to, is this a chicken and an egg situation? Is Lamar Jackson better with Bateman in the lineup or whatnot? Because he's kind of fallen off a little bit. He's still been fine. Like last week, he rebounded, was still, I think, QB 6 or 8 for the week, which is fine. But the 2 or 3 games before that had broken off a little bit. This is an offense that it's going to clearly be predicated on the run, and Mark Andrews is going to be their main guy if he's healthy. That's another situation where you kind of like Duvernay, I think, in the short term, especially if Andrews is out. That feels like they're going to rely a lot more on those short passes and whatnot. The other 2 guys, despite the fact that they played 48 snaps apiece in this last game, they're just not consistent enough options. It was nice to see Demarcus Robinson, on national TV getting all those targets that really came out of nowhere. But I wouldn't expect that to be repeated again the whole season, because he was one of the most brutally inefficient wide receivers in football with Kansas City last year. He was just like awful when you looked at the metrics of expected play versus what he did. He was bad. And if you're that brutally inefficient with Patrick Mahomes, that kind of makes me very wary of relying on him as someone with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who let's just face it, he's not Patrick Mahomes when it comes to that kind of volume and that kind of gunslinger mentality, pushing the ball downfield.
Yeah, none of these receivers really piqued my interest. I think Duvernay is the only one who has any ability to score fantasy points on a consistent basis. He just has the speed to be able to do things, has the ability to break away in space. This kind of ties in with a question we had. Stats Guru says that a viewer wasn't able to post, wants to know if Andrews is playing Monday. I don't think that Andrews is playing Monday because they have their bye the following week. I think they're going to rest him up. They're probably going to rest up Gus Edwards as well, go into the bye week, come out with those two healthy. So I expect to see a lot of Isaiah Likely. I expect to see a lot of Devin Duvernay. And I expect to see a tandem in the backfield between Justice Hill and Kenyon Drake. So probably going to see some 12 personnel. We're probably going to see some dual running back sets, and then we're going to see some creative schemes for Duvernay, and they're going to rely on Lamar Jackson and his legs in this game, in my opinion. So I'm straying away from the rest of this receiving core. I don't think it's anything that we can really count on, trust, or even have really any hopes for. Actually, quite frankly, moving forward, Michael Thomas. Season-ending IR. What a letdown. Here he is. So played in 2019, was like the reception leader. Gets hurt in 2020, doesn't play in 2021. Here we are. It's 2022. He's only played a couple of games. He's out. Is this the last time that we will see Michael Thomas in the NFL, do you think, moving forward? Or do you think he comes back in 2023?
It might be the last time we see him in New Orleans. It feels like, this is a situation where you kind of have to wonder, has he been really trying to be healthy? Because if you'll remember, back when he originally got hurt, he was not even placed on IR that year. We kept thinking that whole season that in 2020 that he was going to come back, or maybe he comes back for the playoffs and this and that, but he didn't. And then he missed the entire 2021 season, and that really burned us because most of us thought, okay, well, that was a minor injury in 2020. Now he's had the full off season to get healthy. So I don't know about you, Billy, but I targeted Thomas a lot in my drafts last season. I felt like, man, if I get him as my wide receiver 3, I'm gonna be killing it this year. And then, he didn't do anything. So, there was one particular thing. I think I took him over DJ Moore. Man, I regretted that last year. But I'm sure he'll be fine. But maybe this is just his way. Maybe he just wants out. I know he was a little disgruntled before, and it's like. If you're unhappy with an offense when you were being just pummeled with targets from Drew Brees, I can't imagine that an Andy Dalton-led offense is going to be the kind of thing that's going to keep him particularly happy. So, he'll probably end up. I'm sure he'll be fine, for next year. But he's not someone that considering how this has played out since 2019, he's not a guy I'm going to go out of my way to target. And it feels like. Maybe if he went to a team like a more potent offense that needs receivers, like I don't know, Chiefs, maybe that'd be interesting. But again, like I said, he's not. I got burned in 2021, and I didn't draft him too much this year. But I was starting to regret it early on when he was looking good. But here it is.
So Call of Duty was released only 6 days ago. Is this a coincidence, Jody?
Are we talking about Kyler Murray now, or it's Michael Thomas? Are they boys when it comes to that game or something?
I don't know. Maybe he wanted to sit at home, get better at Call of Duty so he could beat Kyler.
Kyler actually had a pretty good game Sunday, so maybe he's kind of over that now, or maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's waiting for this week to really attack it. I guess we'll find out Sunday, huh?
Who's the biggest beneficiary in this offense? Maybe outside of Chris Olave. I think that's the easy answer. Is Taysom Hill a reliable starter moving forward? Are we going to see Jarvis Landry again, or Landry? What's your take on the rest of this receiving core?
Landry was back at practice, so that's encouraging. That would probably really eat into Traquan Smith's snaps, or Smith may move on over to the perimeter, but it feels like, on the outside, the Saints have been pretty firm with Marquez Callaway and Chris Olave on the outside, and they've been using, Smith in the slot. If Landry comes back, you'll see Traquan Smith snaps. He'll probably rotate in both spots, and maybe he'll take a few snaps away from Callaway, but benefactor, I wish I could tell you that I had confidence that this would be the big week for Taysom Hill, but it's much fun as it's been to try to predict him from, Billy, from our rankings perspective, and, you being the reigning number 1 draft and the current reigning number 1 in-season ranker, it gets frustrating because Taysom Hill is potentially such a cheat code that he can get in there with very few targets and end up being the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 tight end just like that. Or if he doesn't get those little gimmicky goal line carries, or he's not coming in and taking snaps away from Andy Dalton in the red zone, then he could, getting 2 targets for 12 yards, he could really hurt you that week. So I wish, like I said, I wish it was something that we could more reliably predict, maybe without, maybe if the Saints, were to get him on the field a little bit more consistently, that might work out. But so far it feels like, they seem pretty happy with the way things are working out.
So I guest appeared on a podcast last week and talked about Taysom Hill and how I think it's ridiculous that we have to rank him every week as a tight end because clearly he's a running back. He has, up until last week, he had only had 2 targets on the season. He had only had 5 receiving yards on the season. He doubled his targets last week. He got 2 more targets last week. He caught 11 yards, so he more than doubled his receiving totals for the year. That being said, he had 10 rushing attempts and 61 more yards on the ground. I even stated in the podcast that we couldn't look at the Raiders secondary when we were ranking Taysom Hill, and we had to look at their front and what they were able to do against the run, which they were also bottom 6 against as well. Is this the kind of mentality that we have to have with Taysom Hill moving forward? Is he going to consistently earn his snap share on the ground? Snaps have not been pretty, only 35% last week, 35.9 to be exact. I'm not going to round up for him because I don't like him. So 35%. Do we see a larger share? Landry's coming back. I don't expect to see a larger share. Do we continue to see him on the ground? What's your thoughts here?
I think they'll keep using him the way they've been using him, but I don't see why. Thomas hasn't played in weeks, so I don't see all of a sudden that Taysom Hill is going to start getting more touches. I think they like him in the role. They're putting him in. If anything, his presence kind of hurts Andy Dalton. Now, I don't think too many people are relying on Andy Dalton, but there's plenty of super flex leagues out there, and he probably came off as a really nice waiver ad for somebody, so you can predictably put him in your lineup. A lot of us, are struggling in our super flex lineups, or in particular in week 9 when you have 6 teams on bye. Dalton's the kind of guy that you've had on your bench or you went to the waiver wire to plug in this week. But even with the Saints scoring, if they were to score 26 to 30 points somewhere in there, Dalton's upside is just so limited because Taysom Hill is going to come in and it's where he comes in. He comes in the red zone and takes those valuable reps and snaps away from Dalton's. It's like I said, Billy, he's a frustrating one to rank from our perspective every week because you're looking, we're looking at raw numbers and we look at, like you just said, he's got 4 targets all season. And here I am wondering, can I or should I put Taysom Hill as a top 10 tight end this week? Because you've got to hedge your bets because he just got 10 rushes in one game. Well, that's monster. You're getting that kind of production for your tight end. Well, that's 6 points right there. And not to mention that he can come in and throw a touchdown. But it's the fact that he can come in and he limits Alvin Kamara's scoring upside. Not last week when Kamara went crazy, but remember, heading into last week, Alvin Kamara hadn't scored at all. And now we have Mark Ingram on the shelf. So now you're okay, you know what, maybe. Now that I'm thinking about, maybe Taysom Hill's snaps do go up a little bit because I just remembered that Mark Ingram was actually going to be sidelined for a while. So it's possible that he gets up to higher than 35, maybe to 40% snap share. But again, he's maddeningly difficult to rank every week. I think I guess if you're lucky enough to have Taysom Hill as your tight end, you just keep starting him every week.
So I kind of feel seen, and I feel like you're completely disrespecting Andy Dalton here because I am relying on him in plenty of leagues this week. And
sure, so am I.
You look at his
Billy, I've got a league where I had to start P.J. Walker and Andy Dalton every week in a super flex league. That's how bad it can get at quarterback when you lose a guy. Or in my case, built up a dynasty roster with Phillip Rivers and who was the other guy? Sam Darnold was my QB3. I can't remember the other guy retired too. So Cam Newton. So yeah.
So Andy Dalton was quarterback 2, week 7, 29.54 fantasy points. Last week, week 8, he was quarterback 18. This week, however, though, he gets the Baltimore Ravens, who are the 25th ranked defense versus the quarterback position. They are the 29th ranked defense versus the wide receiver position. Dalton's looking pretty good this week, I think.
Yeah, you can justify putting him in around QB 15, but like I said, it's a little bit risky in the sense of he might get in there, throw for 260 yards, but maybe he has 0 touchdowns because they put gimmicky Taysom Hill in to toss a couple of short touchdowns. It's always a risk with him. That's why
I'm risking it for the biscuit here, Jody.
I don't. Hey man, it's week 9. 6 teams are off. You do what you got to do.
Last couple questions, and we're gonna end the stream for the night. Get out there and watch some Thursday night football. Dare I say? We have absolutely. This one's quick. Likely is absolutely a must start if Andrews is out, and likely is more than likely a top 5 tight end in my rankings if Andrews is out. How about you, Jody?
Top 5. That's bold. I like it, but yes, with Mark Andrews out, you have to think that he's pretty comfortably around tight end 1 range.
Yeah, and that is even with the Saints, who are top 4 against the tight end position, but no Bateman, no Andrews. We just talked about how decimated this receiving core is. It is bold, but you look at his usage last week, and it was very promising after Andrews left, and likely is a freak athlete in my opinion. This question is specifically for Jody because I answered this question on Discord and did not like my answer apparently. So let's get Jody's opinion here. Jody specifically, I would love to know your thoughts on adding Deshaun Watson. Do you think you would ever start him over Joe Burrow in fantasy playoffs?
I'd have to actually look at the particular schedule for both teams, but
I can give it to you. Cleveland faces the Ravens, the Saints, and Washington.
Can't like that Saints matchup. I mean,
yep. And then you have Cincinnati faces the Bucks, the Patriots, and the Bills.
Ooh, can't like that. You don't want to. Is that week 17 for the Bills?
Yeah, week 17 for the Bills. Final game, championship.
Right. And who would Cleveland be playing that week?
Washington.
Oh yeah. Sorry, but if Watson comes back, you have to assume that immediately when Deshaun Watson is back on the field that he's a top 10 weekly quarterback right away, even in the lesser Cleveland offense. He may take a little while, clearly he hasn't played in a long time, so there may be a lot of rust, whatever. So I would feel way more comfortable with Joe Burrow. And so I would probably stick with Burrow, but let's just say week 15, 14, Watson's starting to come into his own. He's throwing for 250, 300 a game, and he's getting a couple of touchdowns, and you get to the playoff time. Again, I don't like getting cute with your quarterback. It feels like what I hit on the top of the show is once you have a top 5 quarterback, you don't typically want to get cute. So if you rode Burrow that long, I could see sticking with him. But if Deshaun Watson justifies it and shows some at the end of the regular season that he's back to being a top 5, top 10 quarterback, you could consider him that week. I don't know, Billy, did you say you can't do it?
So I'm not quite sure you can play Deshaun Watson over Burrow. At that point, you're expecting Chase is back. We haven't seen Deshaun Watson play since January 3rd, 2021. He was on a different team. He had a different coach, a different system, different wide receivers, different offensive line, different division. He comes into, in my opinion, a tougher division now. Yeah. He comes into a situation where he does not have Deshaun Watson. Where he does not have DeAndre Hopkins. And I'm not too convinced that we're going to see the full form of Deshaun Watson here in 2022.
Well, you might not. One thing to keep in mind also is the Browns are leaning towards being out of playoff contention at that time, so that might not motivate them, or they might not feel the need to, especially with his salary, the way the structure to set up. Definitely don't want him getting hurt or whatever, but it feels like, what I'm saying is, I guess maybe if he's earning the playing time, you can justify in that bad matchup for the Bills, you could maybe justify putting him in your lineup. It's a little bit of risk, but like you were just kind of indicating, Billy, you got to see it first because we haven't seen this guy in basically 2 full years. So we'd have to see him out on the field and what he can do. And, is he healthy, and how's he looking this new offense? And like you just said, the new conditions and whatnot. So I definitely, like, right off the bat, I wouldn't do it. But if by week 14, 15, by the time the playoffs are rolling around, if Deshaun Watson is looking like Deshaun Watson 2019, Deshaun Watson 2020, then you can maybe.
Okay, we have 30 seconds. We're going to end this. We're going to do rapid fire to the last ones. No explanation, just answer off the top of your head. Is Chuba Hubbard worth starting?
Yes.
DJ Moore, Josh Palmer.
DJ Moore over Palmer.
Me too as well. The guy has Andrews. Should he drop Dawson Knox for likely? Yes for me.
Yes.
Expectation for Stevenson rest of the season. I'm going to say running back 30.
Running back 25 to 30 sounds right.
Okay. Better stash at quarterback, Pickett or Matthews?
Matthews?
Yeah, I'm trying to think who Matthews is off the top of my head. That was too fast.
Oh, I'm going to go Pickett then.
Yeah. Pickett's the answer. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate you all live here on the podcast. I'll be back on Saturday night. And then next week, on Friday, Thursday, Jody will be back. Friday, Jeff Ratcliffe will be joining me to discuss some football as well on the Grind Time podcast. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Have a good night, and good luck in your matchups. Bye-bye.